Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Greetings and salutations, and a big warm welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And a topic that is unavoidable at the moment, and for good reason, is the importance of digital experiences and improving the user experiences for employees. But how do you measure it? What is the ROI of it? What business value does it create? And can you still maintain the same elements of control and visibility? Well, after reading a great report by a Citrix partner called Lakeside Software, and the report was called The Future of Digital Workplaces, Bridging the Critical 2021 Digital Experience Divide Between CEOs, IT Leaders and Employees. I will post a link in the show notes for you to learn more about it, but it really opened my eyes up to a few areas. And Lakeside Software is a leader in digital experience monitoring and a Citrix partner. So with all that in mind, I invited Peter Collins from Lakeside Software and Allen Furmanski from Citrix onto the podcast today to talk about how they're working together to solve some of the biggest challenges around digital experiences. But enough scene setting for me. Let's get Peter and Allen onto the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Peter Collins, and I am a solution architect here at Lakeside Software, focusing on a product called SysTrack. Prior to Lakeside, I was the director of Northeast Sales Engineering for Citrix, where I spent 15 years. And with that, I guess I will pass it over to Allen.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. I'm Allen Furmanski. I'm with the Citrix product marketing team. I've been with the company over 13 years in a variety of different roles, including product management, alliances, services, and readiness. And in my current role in marketing, I look after our hybrid cloud solutions, apps and desktops, analytics, and a little hodgepodge of other activities here and there. Great to be with everyone.
It's a pleasure to have you both on the podcast today. And Peter, before joining Lakeside, I believe you spent 15 years at Citrix. So I'm curious, having been on both sides of the fence, what lessons have you learned along the way and how has it helped you solve your customers' problems at Lakeside?
It is very interesting because both Citrix and Lakeside focus on customer experience. How your user experience was a very big point while we were at Citrix. It certainly was something that they focused on a lot. And Lakeside's primary focus is to be able to go out there and look at how your users are, how their performance is on their individual devices, what's going on with those users, and to help you go and figure out where problems are happening. We used to joke a lot at Citrix that anytime that there was a problem, and the little splash screen came up that said, unable to connect to a MetaFrame server, that every problem in the world was blamed on Citrix. Because it meant that the one thing you saw was that I can't connect to the server where I do all my job, which is great because it shows you how mission critical that is. But it doesn't really tell you the story. It doesn't tell you where those problems are happening. It doesn't tell you why you can't connect to your MetaFrame server. It may have nothing to do with Citrix. It may have to do with backend routers or your user experience or your applications or DNS or a million different things. But that really was sort of a way that people looked at it and said, hey, my experience is I can't connect to this server, and that's what it's telling me on the screen. So you really have to start looking at what that user experience is and how you can actually make that a better user experience.
And on that topic of user experience, Allen, can you tell me a little bit more about Citrix's relationship with Lakeside and how the two of you complement each other and the kind of problems that you're able to solve together as a result of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Citrix and Lakeside have had a long-standing relationship around providing joint value for our customer base. As I mentioned, I've been with Citrix over 13 years now, and I've really seen the variety of integration opportunities that we've had for key projects in Lakeside. And I'll give you an example for those that have the historical perspective, going back to the Zen Desktop 5 family. When we introduced that, and we had a success accelerator program that became known as Project Accelerator to really help customers make that transition to whatever platform they may have previously been on to the newer Zen Desktop 5 family, walking them through the process. Well, what was that key tool that helped our customers do that in the assessment phase? It was Lakeside. And that's when we had sort of the recommended approach there. And then just even fast forwarding to today, I'm involved with a lot of Microsoft activities with Azure and some of the value add there and some of the migration guides. Again, Lakeside being a critical tool to really help in the assessment process and ensure customers understand the environment. So yeah, longstanding relationship and just incredible value to get customers on the right path, like Peter alluded to, and ensure that they're most successful with their environment. Like it's funny, like Peter mentioned, right? Every problem could be a Citrix problem. And I remember years ago, we had like posters around our support teams and services teams that essentially said just that. Hey, it's, not every problem is a Citrix problem. And it showed like a mugshot of, a guy with a background. And it's just, we can laugh about it now, but it's true. And having these tools like Lakeside really helps administrative teams to proactively, resolve problems, prevent problems, and, just get things right from the get-go.
And I think with the rapid rise in remote work and acceleration of digital transformation initiatives, it does feel that almost every organisation everywhere, no matter where people are listening in the world, are now looking for ways to achieve greater agility and possibly resilience as well after the events of the last 18 months. So Peter, to begin with, what kind of things can companies achieve with both Citrix and Lakeside?
So certainly, they can achieve a lot. They can be able to determine what is affecting their users. As Alan mentioned, really, there are a lot of different components that can go into it. What's my latencies? What's happening out there in the environment? And how is this working? I equated to, we as an industry used to spend a lot of money monitoring our routers, monitoring our servers, monitoring every other component of our environment, except actually monitoring that end user device and trying to figure out what's happened. Now that our users have moved remotely and they're out of the office, we've lost visibility into a lot more of that components. I don't know what the home router is in many cases. Well, if I do have Lakeside, I do know that. I don't know how far away from their router they are or their Wi-Fi, and are they connected or are they not connected? So when these people start calling in or telling me that their computers are slow, it's sort of like what I was mentioning with the Citrix problem. That's what their perception is. We don't know it unless you have a tool to measure it. You can't solve something that you haven't already measured. So I can improve something if I've measured it, and I can use SysTrack to be able to check all those different data points to be able to tell you, hey, this user is having problems, and these are the areas that those problems are related to. So now you can start figuring out what's going on, instead of the pat answer that a lot of people get. Sure, we'll ship you a new laptop, which can be very expensive.
And Alan, is there anything that springs to mind there for any business leaders and how they can leverage the best of Citrix and Lakeside and the kind of thing that they can achieve by doing that?
Yeah, no, just to kind of echo at first what Peter mentioned, it's all around user experience, right? Because if you get everything else right in your deployment, but the user experience isn't there, then the adoption isn't going to be there. Ultimately, the success of the environment isn't going to pan out over the long run. So everything needs to be user-centric focus. And I think that's even more so emphasized as a result of the pandemic and post-pandemic, when we have this more distributed workforce, this more work from anywhere model that a lot of companies have employed. And Citrix and Lakeside solutions are able to deliver that great user experience and also provide, like Peter alluded to, the insight that administrative teams need to stay on top of the environment and answer fundamental questions like where might I need more resources, or are we experiencing some network congestion in this particular area, to really provide more than just data, but actual insights and actionable actionable items that admins can go ahead and follow up on and ensure the environment is meeting business objectives, number one, as well as getting the most possible benefit and value out of the significant investment that's been made for the hybrid cloud solution.
And Peter, I believe Lakeside recently ran a global market survey on current enterprise digital workplace challenges. And when I took a quick look at that before we started recording today, one of the key findings that stood out for me was that 90% of C-level executives say that moving or improving digital experiences is a high priority post-pandemic. So why do you think executives are placing more importance on these experiences? And are there any other parts of the survey that you'd like to call out with me today?
Certainly. I think a lot of it goes back to that whole idea of, hey, we can monitor all the other things around what we're doing, but as an IT department or an IT executive, my job is to provide users with applications and data to do their job. And a lot of the other components that we monitor don't necessarily always tell us indicative of how we're doing with that. We can put out surveys. There's a lot of different things we can do to sort of help us to get an idea of that. But really, when you start figuring it out, other things we found from that survey is at best 1 in 10 problems are reported to the help desk. That's amazing, because that means that there's all these other problems happening with your users that aren't being reported. Things like applications faults, which could be indicative of malware in the application or not updating things or other components. So when you start looking at all those different pieces that aren't reported into the service desk, you start missing a whole area of things that are happening in your environment, especially with users home. So that becomes very important. And it's amazing, or it was amazing to me at first, but the more I think about it, the more it seems logical, that a person's overall job satisfaction, 30% of that has to do with their satisfaction with their IT experience. So it comes down to the fact that, hey, you know what? If I'm beating my head against the wall to try to get at the applications and do the things that I need to do, then that can be very difficult. And that can make me very frustrated. I think Citrix has been really good through the years of actually making a lot of that easier, because you don't have to update the applications locally. You can update them in the back end. You can give that user experience through ICA. So there's a lot of components there that Citrix has made very easy for the user to be able to get at their environments. But it's also this whole idea that I think that there is a shift from looking at sort of all that back end to actually looking at the personal side of it, and starting to think about the human in the equation and how are we affecting them, and how is the job that I'm providing to them or the tools that I'm providing to them helping them to do their job or hindering them in it.
Absolutely. And I do suspect we will have decision makers and business leaders listening all over the world to our conversation today who've not yet made the leap and are concerned about letting go and losing control and visibility of their infrastructure. What would you advise to those people listening, Peter?
Actually, SysTrack will provide you with visibility that most people don't have. What's going on in the environment? What are the applications? I can't tell you how many times we've gone down and done what we call health checks or looked at our user environments, and we find different situations. I had a healthcare organization that had a application that was faulting on their login UI, adding 20 seconds to everybody's login. But and you'd think, 20 seconds, it's no big deal. But when you start multiplying that by multiple users, and then you start thinking about that in a healthcare environment, when you start doing that, the math and the numbers are incredible. So the things that you get, the visibility that you get from SysTrack as far as what's happening with your applications, what should the sizing of my backend Zen app, Zen desktop servers be? How do I go and figure out when these users are complaining, really where that is? The worst thing I've ever had to do was to sit on calls all night long because somebody has some problem and it's an intermittent problem, And we don't know if it is the backend hypervisor, it's the operating system, it's the Zen app, Zen desktop component. And you got vendors from all these different companies sitting there trying to figure it out. And everyone's saying, nope, it's not me. And you really need to go and start to be able to pinpoint where the problem is happening. Those types of things and increasing decreasing your mean time to resolution is really what Lakeside can help you do.
And is there anything you can add to that, Alan, as well, just to ease any concerns?
I can certainly relate to this notion of being on the call when customers are having these intermittent issues. Going back to my services days when I was a on-call escalation engineer, I'd be on the phone up until midnight and beyond when they're doing migrations and upgrades and they have these intermittent issues. And I just really hope that they had or would invest in solutions like Lakeside to help ease the process through, because like they say, you don't know what you don't know. And having a tool like Lakeside really helps to, again, provide that necessary level of visibility. The other thing I'll mention as well is, when you think about a tool like Lakeside or even an environment like Citrix, sure, the initial setup is important in the environment, but it's also very much so the life cycle of the environment and the ongoing maintenance and monitoring that are absolutely key to ensuring success. And when you have a tool like Lakeside at your disposal, you're able to, again, be more actionable and allows your IT team to focus more on the strategic elements, right? No one wants to be stuck in the hamster wheel, constantly working through a lot of the same common issues when you have strategic business imperatives that are critical to ensure your company is maintaining an edge and you're being profitable and serving your customer base, shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. So just again, to echo the value that something like Lakeside can provide, and having been there before and worked with some of our largest customers, it's absolutely an incredible asset to help any IT organization.
And just to try and bring to life everything that we're talking about here today, Peter, do you have a customer story that you could possibly share that just to help listeners understand how it could work in their organization and keep that visibility on every device?
Certainly. So there are a lot of them. We definitely have a long history with Citrix. One that does come to mind is one of our larger financial organizations that outsourced their Citrix environment to an SI. And they originally went out there and said, well, I don't know how big of a system for my users need. So I'm going to give everybody 8 vCPUs and 16 gigs of RAM. And they went out there and they said, okay, so this is the VM you're going to create for all these people, and go out there and do this. The first few months, they got bills for this and they were a little sticker shocked. They used Lakeside to go back out there and to monitor those systems and to figure out, you know what? This executive doesn't need that type of a machine. They can have a smaller machine, because really all they're doing is Outlook and Excel and a few other things. So they were able to use SysTrack to look at those users' actual performance and actual resource requirements, and be able to take that and to right-size those users' VMs to a tune of 1.6 million euros annually of savings to be able to go and look at that. So there's a variety of different areas that Lakeside works in and helps people with. That's certainly one of them, is right-sizing your back-end VM environments. Another one I had was a company that was having a problem where it looked like it was a dropped application, and they couldn't figure out why this application kept dropping its back-end connections. And they were able to actually use Lakeside to track that back to the % ready time on their back-end VMs or their back-end hypervisors was really high. And because those servers were over provisioned, they were having a problem that didn't seem anything related to what it was. and they were able to use that. So it comes down to being able to correlate different problems, to look at things and to be able to say, hey, you know what? These users are having this problem, and it seems to be systemic around this type of a user, so I can actually utilize it that way.
Love that story. Really brings to life everything we're talking about today. And Alan, is there anything that you'd like to add on there?
Yeah, definitely, Neil. So in addition to those use cases, some other use cases I think are great around Lakeside are when you're working with unified communication solutions, right? So like a classic, say, Skype for Business, which now increasingly a lot of customers are using Microsoft Teams. And at Citrix, we've had an optimization pack for years that we've collaborated with Microsoft on. When you add in a tool like Lakeside, it really helps to understand the environment, the data flow, and how you can best optimize the solution such that you literally get the best of both worlds, having the client in the data center or cloud of your choice. So everything is secure there with your chat logs and your data and the signaling, the authentication, right? And then you offload your voice and video to your capable endpoint. So I think Lakeside plays a big role in those kinds of situations. And the other one as well, if I recall, is around the use of GPUs and vGPUs. So, a lot of customers, I know Peter mentioned some healthcare customers. Increasingly, we see more and more customers taking advantage of GPUs in their virtual apps and desktops. And of course, at Citrix, we pioneered that technology over a decade ago in the aerospace industry, but it's no longer just for the high-end, right, designers, CAD, CAM, hey, let's design an airplane kind of thing. It's very much also for healthcare, radiology scans, or just increasingly even working with a web browser to present different kinds of videos and images. So yet another use case in which Lakeside can really help to understand the resource utilization, understand what the baseline should be, and then work from there. So, to Peter's point, especially when you're working with public cloud infrastructure and you're on, the company dime, you really want to ensure that you're taking more of a vertical load balancing approach as opposed to, spreading out amongst, much larger instance types.
And we will have people listening from all over the world today. And the one thing that they will all have in common is employees will be working from anywhere, everywhere, and on every device. So, Peter, can you tell me a little bit more about the importance of the digital experience? And also for any decision makers there, of course, what is the ROI of getting it right too?
It's amazing because in the past, we kind of thought of this as a soft cost or a soft benefit. But as you will go, if you go to www.lakesidesoftware.com and download that most recent market research that we have done, it's very interesting in being able to see that this is actually related a lot to employee retention, employee satisfaction. There is hard dollars associated with support costs and being able to find the problem for the user sooner. There are hard dollars associated with being able to give the user the correct machine. We just did a digital conference, and one of our customers, Florida Blue Cross Blue Shield, spoke about how they actually used Lakeside and SysTrack to review machines and to see what was happening. They had people who were having problems with individual machines, and they would send them a new machine, and they sent them, I think they said they sent one employee up to 5 machines, and none of that fixed the problem. Could you imagine the cost and the frustration and just wanting to pull your hair out, getting new machines and you still have the same problem? That kind of frustration is very difficult for people to deal with. So when you start looking at this problem, it is not necessarily the soft HR problem that we kind of thought it was. It's more of a cost to the organization, satisfaction to employees being able to get their jobs done in a timely fashion. And all of those things tend to be exasperated by the fact that people are now home. And I don't even know what part of it is causing the problem. Is it their network? Is it the application that's a SaaS-based application talking to some backend. All of these are things that Lakeside can give you insight into and allow you to go and start figuring out what's going on and how those things are working and where those problems are happening and what's your latency to this server in the back end. And as we start looking at things that go more to the cloud, that becomes even more important because now I actually have my desktop sitting somewhere in Azure. It's an Azure virtual desktop, and I really need to know how that's performing. So this whole idea of digital experience is something that is costing organizations money and something that CEOs are very much focused on because it is something that can improve their user experience. And now keeping and retaining employees is a very important thing in today's world. So I think there's a lot of different components to look at for this, but definitely with everyone moving remote, the whole idea of keeping your employees happy and the digital experience is so important.
Absolutely. And Alan, these must be conversations you're having with your customers at Citrix all the time too, right?
Yeah, exactly. All the time. And I think Peter hit on one particular interesting point that I'd love to expand upon around applications, right? Because it's all about the applications and then naturally the underlying data as well that fuels the business. And when you think about the wide application portfolio that organizations have, in many cases, hundreds of applications, well, what does that strategy look like in terms of maintenance, in terms of roadmap? And how can we answer fundamental questions like which app should we begin with to make that move to public cloud providers of our choice, right? We may have some standalone applications, we may have some client server applications, then we may have some other more complex applications that are multi-tiered applications or homegrown applications. Again, a tool like Lakeside can really help us to better understand the application portfolio and how we can start to think about what are going to be the long-term strategic decisions that we need to make if we're, again, making that move from on-premises to a public cloud provider, and how can we best go about doing that. Lakeside can literally save countless IT hours. So again, they can focus more on the strategic elements of the job at hand, as opposed to trying to find out every little detail about the application. So yeah, that's one area in particular that stood out to me. And that's a big tenet of our consulting practice as well. When our consultants are working in some of the largest, most challenging environments around the world, right? A tool like Lakeside is going to help in providing the necessary infrastructure assessments and creating that best plan forward for true hybrid cloud on the customer's terms.
It's such an important point you made there, Alan, on applications, because every business will have literally hundreds of them that they heavily rely on every day. And of course, there is an old quote that you can't improve what you don't measure. So, Alan, can you expand on how organizations can measure the digital experience in their organization too? Because everyone's chasing it, but measuring that improvement is equally as important, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And, this is different for every organization, but there's still some fundamental things I think that every organization needs to think through, right? We've talked about the end user perspective and kind of looking at that 360 end user perspective in terms of what networks they're connecting through, what devices they're on, the applications they use, and really start to build this holistic view from the end user perspective, right? Not necessarily just the back end. Oh, this is our infrastructure. This is our, our servers, our cloud, but really paint that picture from the end user perspective. And that'll help to unfold a lot of key elements around performance, around availability, and then ultimately driving up the acceptance and the user experience in the long run. Because user experience, it can be subjective, but I think we'd all agree, and Peter mentioned this earlier, if we have a 20-second faster logon time, especially if you're a doctor really needing to get the patient records, that's going to make a world of difference. And again, a tool like Lakeside can help put things into perspective in terms of what you should expect and what users can expect given a certain workload and the applications and the operating systems and such that are involved, from just the rich data sets, from the experience of having doing this set up for years. And so, yeah, definitely look at things from the user perspective. And I'd say also just kind of, try to challenge the norm in terms of, what you think is possible. What we've seen in a lot of cases with customers running classic Citrix solutions nowadays with, assessment capabilities and analysis from Lakeside can really unlock some of the latest innovations that we have on the Citrix side and make those recommendations to leverage inherent capabilities that we have in the protocol or some of our HDX user experience technologies to give that best possible user experience on one side, while at the same time, like Peter also mentioned, ensuring that we're providing that back-end scalability and certainly cost savings in the cloud. So performance and scalability and user experience, these elements don't have to be mutually exclusive. And working with Lakeside, we can ensure that that's not the case.
I love that. And Peter, I know experiences in organizations is a topic very close to your heart. Is there anything you'd like to add on measuring those experiences?
Yeah, I find it very interesting and very positive these days. I am meeting more directors of digital end user experience than I've ever seen in the industry before. I don't think that was a title 7-8 years ago. And now it seems to be something that we're seeing in a lot of different organizations. The whole idea of being able to measure things, Alan mentioned applications. That is an incredible area that we work in, being able to tell you not only what applications are installed for your users, but how those users are using those applications and which ones are in focus and they're using on a daily basis. Being able to go out there and to look at one of these digital experience management packages and to have the ability to track what's going on in those environments and to be able to see what's going on is an invaluable tool. I can't tell you how many organizations has told me that their CISO has required them to put on so many security agents onto these endpoint devices that they don't know what's happening and that their users are complaining that they're slow and they really can't tell what's going on. I had another financial organization out here in the Northeast whose CISO said, hey, you need to put this new security agent on all of your Zen app servers or Zen desktop servers, and we're going to go out there. And they went and they did it and realized that it was going to require them 20% more hardware. They didn't say we didn't want to go and put this on, but they did have quantitative measurements to be able to say to the CISO, great, you want this, it's going to cost you X. And he had to either come up with the money for that or go back to the company and tell them to make their agent more efficient. So that whole idea of figuring out where those problems are happening and how do I pinpoint what's going on in that environment makes it work so much better and makes your end users happier. Makes them happier, which is not just that granola eating thing. It is actually something that equates to dollars these days. It retains those employees. It means they can do their job faster. It means that they're not sitting there waiting for their device to do things. All of these things are actual improvements for your organization and extremely beneficial.
And we have talked today about what businesses can do to improve their businesses right here, right now, and today. But if we look a little bit further ahead, Peter, what excites you about the future of work and the role that Lakeside will play in that future too?
I think it's really neat to be able to say, well, okay, so I live in New York, or I live in New Jersey, and much of my life I've worked in New York. This whole idea of not having to get on a train and spend an hour commuting each way to go into the city to go and see customers or whatever, or to go into an office for the purpose of being in an office, is very, very appealing to me. I think it's also very appealing to a lot of people that I've talked to. From our surveys and everything else that we're seeing out there, I don't think people are going back to a 5-day-a-week work in the office job. I think we have just created a hybrid environment where people may go in 2 days, 3 days. I may want to be around people. I may have meetings that I want to attend in person, but I also may want to be able to work from home at certain times. Now that a lot of organizations have figured out that I can do that and I can be efficient at doing that. So then it comes down to being able to start figuring out where those problems are happening. Support organizations and building your users' experience is very important. It is sometimes the unsung hero. Being able to make sure things are working right and that people are happy is very important to how they are going to be efficient and do their job. So monitor what your end users' experience is, look at those components, be able to start figuring out how you can improve those components, and it will have all sorts of ancillary benefits as you go down the road.
Love that. And I think those words will resonate with a lot of people listening. And Alan, from a Citrix point of view, is anything that makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning or just excites you about the future of work?
Yeah. So I'm incredibly excited about the future of work and the opportunity that we have in the coming months and years. And like Peter mentioned, remote work is absolutely here to stay. It's unfortunate that it took a pandemic to, I think, reinforce Citrix's position that we've had for decades in that, work is not a place. It's what we do. It's what we're able to accomplish as humans. And work and life don't have to be mutually exclusive. I think I was reading the other day that I believe it was Iceland was testing the 4-day work week, and they found that to be hugely successful, right? So, these kinds of, work shifting and moving away from the traditional 9-to-5 office paradigm, and just even the notion of, working remote. Now it's like, why do I need to go into the office versus why do I need to work from home, right? So totally flipping that on its side. And Citrix and Lakeside solutions just tie perfectly into that, because there's always going to be a vast amount of data generated in a delivery infrastructure. So it's up to the admins if they want to have a better hold on that data and understanding of the data and have more actionable, tangible insights versus just data and not knowing what to do with it. And Lakeside is that great solution to help really allow customers to get the most out of that significant investment that they've made, while freeing their users to work from anywhere. And like we alluded to as well, still providing a really strong security posture by understanding the environment, understanding the data and the patterns and how the applications are being used. It's an incredible partnership, and I'm very excited for the road ahead as we look for more forward-thinking, innovative technologies, applications, IoT, and just the opportunity that it presents to us. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
That's a beautiful moment to end on. Well, thank you so much to both of you for joining me on the podcast today. But before I do let you go, Peter, first of all, can you remind everyone listening of where they can find Lakeside online and contact your team if they've got any questions?
Certainly. So it is www.lakesidesoftware, all one word, .com. And you can sign up for a free demo. You can download any of this research we have just done. There's a lot of great information there. So feel free, and we're happy to see you.
Cool. And Alan, for anyone wanting to learn more about anything we covered today, especially in the area, Citrix.com is a huge website. Is there a particular area that you'd like to point the listeners to?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. Citrix.com is quite large. So take a look at our Citrix Ready program. You'll find it at citrixready.citrix.com or alternatively citrix.com/ready. And of course, look up Lakeside. You'll find their solutions. You'll find additional documentation, integrations, versions, a lot of great data there within our Citrix Ready program. They've been a long time partner of ours.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of information in a short amount of time. And also I think we've answered a lot of questions that business leaders all over the world would have been exploring over the past few months. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, exploring the future of work. Love to do it again in the future. But more than anything, just a big thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Neil.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
I genuinely love how Lakeside Software and Citrix tie into each other to help provide that visibility that IT teams need to design and support productive digital workplaces. But if anything resonated with you in today's interview, or if you've got a story that you'd love to share with us, I'd love to hear it. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. Just look for @NeilC.Hughes. Nice and easy to find. Remember, you are what makes this podcast special and why there is at least one episode going out 365 days of the year. So please keep your questions coming in. And also remember, if you need help launching your own podcast, you just want somebody else to worry about editing audio files and all that stuff, or need help ghostwriting articles for your business, you can learn more about how you can work with me at techblogwriter.co.uk. But more than anything, I just want to hear your insights, your struggles, how you're overcoming them. And if you want to come on the podcast, let me know too. But that's it for today's episode. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.